Robert the Doll is a doll that was made in 1904 and originally bought by an elderly man in Germany. The man later gave the doll to his grandchild, Robert Eugene Otto, as a birthday present. Robert loved the doll, and since Robert was oftenly called Gene by family and friends, he decided to give his own name to the doll, calling the doll Robert. Gene would take Robert everywhere, playing with him and holding conversations with him, loving Robert like a friend. But this would soon change. Gene would claim that the doll would come alive at night and torment him, throwing furniture and stare at him with a malicious glare on his face. Neighbors would claim they would see someone walk around the house when no one was home, and on a few occasions, the mother of the family would report seeing Robert physically walk around the house. The family eventually locked the doll in the attic of the house. Although it was out of sight, it wasn't out of mind, as the family would hear footsteps coming from the attic. After many more years of unexplained occurrences and the house being owned by multiple families, the doll was eventually given to the Fort East Martello Museum, where it resides to this day. These events heavily influenced the movie Child's Play, which I'm sure you have heard of. It's a movie about a young boy that receives a doll for his birthday from his mother. The doll comes alive using voodoo magic and goes on a murder spree and torments the family. In 1968, a girl by the name of Anneliese Michel lost consciousness out of nowhere at just the age of 16. Over the next few years, she continued to experience seizure-like episodes and was eventually put on medications. In 1973, Anneliese began to hear demonic voices telling her that she was doomed to hell. In 1975, Anneliese's behavior worsened, where she started to destroy sacred objects, eat insects, and displayed immense strength. After many years and a whopping 67 exorcisms, all approved by the Vatican, Anneliese Michel eventually died at the age of 23. In an autopsy of her body, the coroner's report stated that she had died of starvation and had a healthy brain with absolutely zero signs of seizures or trauma. The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a 2013 film based on this exorcism, with accurate details such as the consumption of insects and the girl eventually succumbing to starvation. In Enfield, a small suburb in the United Kingdom, during the summer of 1977, two girls by the names of Janet and Margaret Hutchinson witnessed objects being thrown across their rooms. When they told their mother about their experiences, she didn't believe them, but soon realized they weren't lying, and she too witnessed objects levitating and being thrown across the living room. She called the cops, claiming the house was haunted, and during the presence of two police officers, objects were still levitating, with officers claiming a kitchen chair had levitated less than an inch above the ground and had floated 4 feet throughout the kitchen. This started to gain some traction, and within 2 weeks, paranormal investigators, news reporters, skeptics, and believers started to visit the house. One investigator by the name of Maurice Gross claimed that the house was indeed haunted, while others claimed it was a hoax cooked up by the girls. However, during the start of 1978, the youngest girl started to speak in disembodied voices that sounded like someone who had smoked for 50 years. She would sometimes speak in this voice for several hours at a time, with a ventriloquist even claiming that the voices were impossible to be faked and would severely damage her vocal cords. The voice eventually revealed itself as Bill Wilkins, one of the previous homeowners. A year later in 1978, the paranormal occurrences stopped and reportedly never happened again. To this day, Janet and Margaret have claimed that their experiences were not a fabrication. However, they have claimed to have faked and exaggerated some of the events, making all of their statements not trustworthy. To this day, it is the most documented paranormal haunting, so no wonder The Conjuring 2 is directly based off of these events. Although the movie does exaggerate in some scenes, Lorraine Warren, who was one of the investigators who worked on the case, stated that the movie is an accurate representation of what happened in real life. In 1957, in a small town called Plainfield, police raided the house of Edward Gein, suspected of killing a retail worker earlier that day. During their raid, the police found the headless body of the retail worker hung upside down and disemboweled. This obviously horrified the policemen, especially in a small town with no more than 700 people. The police searched the rest of the house and found pots on the stove filled with human flesh, hundreds of bones stacked in his living room, couches and lamps made out of skin, and human faces. And the most psychotic of these all, the police found a full bodysuit made out of human skin, and it was able to be worn. It was later revealed that the suit was made entirely out of a woman's skin and would be worn by Ed, who claimed that the most fun thing he ever did was dress up in the suit, pretending to be his mother, while frolicking in the garden on a full moon. Ed Gein was a cannibalistic, necrophiliac serial killer who dug up over 40 bodies and killed 2 people, although people speculate he killed over 11. Ed's motivation for these psychotic crimes was to simply cope with his mother's death. After she died, he was in extreme emotional distress and wanted her back. In turn, he killed and dug up only women and made a shrine for his mother in her old room. Ed's obsession with his mother and his descent into becoming her inspired the 1960 classic Psycho. Ed Gein's skinning of his victims and cannibalistic nature was the influence for the movie Silence of the Lambs and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The cliche of a small-town serial killer was also based off of Ed Gein's crimes.